Do you have a good memory or a bad memory? You may think that the capacity to remember information is inherent or innate, and you either have a good or a bad memory. But as you learn more about the different concepts in memory, how we forget and how we remember, you may discover that having a good memory is as much a question of strategy as it is of innate ability or talent. Let's begin. In your notebook, without looking it up, write down what the ABCs of psychology are. If you don't know, write, I don't know. Try it again with a little more help. Are the ABCs of psychology apples, bananas, and coconuts, affect, behavior, and cognition, asking, being, and caring, or analysis, book learning, and connections? The correct answer was B, affect, behavior, and cognition. You may have noticed that the second question was easier than the first one. The second question tested your recognition, whether you know the correct answer or information when you see it. Multiple choice exams test recognition. You do not need to be able to pull the information fully from your memory. You just have to be able to recognize it from a list of options. The first question tested recall, whether you can pull the information from your memory without any help or hints. Recall is generally more difficult than recognition. Most memory tasks that are important in your daily life, like remembering someone's name or remembering what you need to buy from the grocery store, involve recall. Today's lecture will discuss basic concepts in memory to help give you a better understanding of how we remember and why we forget. More specifically, it will cover short-term and long-term memory, encoding, storage, and retrieval, and implicit and explicit memory. Short-term memory is sometimes also called working memory. It is a term that is often used incorrectly. Short-term memory refers to the very small amount of information that is in your mind right now. For example, the last few words you listened to are probably what is in your short-term memory, especially if you are writing them down. Information does not stay in short-term memory for a very long time at all, only 15 to 30 seconds, and short-term memory does not hold much information. I think of short-term memory like a backpack because it only holds a little bit of information that you are using right now. But it would be a really annoying backpack because everything in it would disappear 30 seconds after you put it in there. If you really want to remember information to be able to use it in the future, you need to be sure that it gets into your long-term memory. Unlike short-term memory, long-term memory can hold a lot of information for a very long time. I like to think of long-term memory like a storage unit. But this storage unit is magical because it can, at least in theory, hold as much as you put into it for a long time, potentially forever, or at least until you lose your memory or die. Also like a storage unit, just because something is in there doesn't mean that you can easily access it when you need it. In sum, long-term memory has a large capacity and is long-lasting. Most important life tasks, including studying for exams, involve transferring information into long-term memory. So how do you get information into long-term memory? Good question. It starts with encoding. Encoding refers to initially processing information. This could be listening to someone's name as they say it to you, reading your textbook, or hearing a new song on the radio. While you are reading or listening, the information is in your short-term memory. Storage involves the process of moving information into long-term memory and keeping it there. Information moves to long-term memory when we do something with it. This might be making it personally relevant, asking ourselves questions that require us to process the material, or linking it to something we already know. Actively processing information helps move it from short-term memory to long-term memory. This is why professors will often encourage you to be active rather than passive as you attend a lecture or read a textbook. Although it is easy to copy words down from slides verbatim or read a textbook without stopping to think about what you're reading, both techniques tend to use short-term memory, which means that once you are done writing or reading the words, you will probably not remember them. Instead, when you take notes, you can draw pictures or diagrams, or put the text in your own words, or come up with your own examples. You can pause as you read, ask yourself questions, and explain to yourself in your own words what the text is saying. All of this deeper processing will help you move the information into your long-term memory. Retrieval refers to accessing information that is in your long-term memory. It is what you do when you're trying to remember an acquaintance's name or where you parked your car. Remember I told you before that just because something is in your storage unit doesn't mean that you can easily access it and get it out? Have you ever known you know something but not been able to remember it right away and then it comes to you later? This is probably because the information was in your long-term memory, but you had difficulty retrieving it. One thing that helps improve retrieval of information is practice. One of the best ways to review information for exams is to practice retrieving the information. Quizzing yourself is a great way to study. You can think about applying the concepts you just learned to why we forget things. In our daily lives, we encounter so much information that we couldn't possibly remember it all. So we focus on and remember some things and not others. One reason that we don't remember things is that we don't pay attention to them. Think about remembering a new person's name. One problem that I have is that I forget to pay attention while the person is telling me their name. Then, when I try to remember it later, I realize I never really knew it in the first place. Or we may not transfer information from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. We may hear a name and even say, "Nice to meet you, Acacia," but if we don't think about the information after that point, it will quickly fade. A third issue is difficulty with retrieval. This is what happens when you freeze up during an exam but remember the answer 5 minutes after it is finished, or when you remember someone's name an hour after you were chatting with them. Elephants may never forget, but people certainly do. When we do forget, it may be due to a failure to encode, not moving the information to be stored in long-term memory, or difficulty retrieving information from our long-term memory. When I think about memory, I tend to think of information I know that I know. This is the type of information that I could use to answer a question, such as, where did you go to college? How long have you been married? Or what did you do during your last vacation? This is explicit memory. Implicit memory, on the other hand, refers to things we know, but that are not necessarily aware of. One example of implicit memory is procedural memory, which is our memory of how to do well-learned tasks. Things that we often do, we're able to do automatically, without thinking about them. It's as if our bodies just know which steps to go through in what order. These are procedural memories. Let me give you an example of the distinction between explicit and implicit memory. I had an appointment at the district human resources office, and they asked me for my employee ID number. I got really flustered and embarrassed because I couldn't remember it. It was even more embarrassing because I used it to log in online nearly every single day. This gave me an idea. I got out my laptop and opened my email tab. With no problem whatsoever, I typed in my employee ID. Although I struggled to remember it explicitly, my hands knew how to type it easily and quickly. My implicit, procedural memory of my employee ID was strong. Let's discuss an example of someone with memory difficulties. HM had neurosurgery, which removed most of his hippocampus to reduce seizures. After the surgery, HM could not form new memories, a condition called anterograde amnesia. Because of his unique situation, researchers were eager to better understand how HM's memory worked and did not work. They had him perform a variety of tasks and tests and carefully tracked his performance. One task that HM completed was the mirror drawing task, which required him to draw a star inside 2 other stars by looking in the mirror. This task is difficult but gets easier with practice. An interesting thing happened with HM in the mirror drawing task. Although he could not remember having completed the task, he got better at it. HM's case helped researchers begin to uncover the differences between explicit and implicit memory, short-term and long-term memory, and the importance of the hippocampus in memory. Let's apply some of what you've learned so far to how to improve your own memory. I will also add a couple of other concepts that may be helpful as well. When you're learning something new and you know that it's important, like your new boss's name or concepts that will be on an exam, remember to focus and pay attention to the information. After you get the new information, you should find a way to process the information actively. For someone's name, you could try and think of someone else with the same name. You could say, "Oh, you have the same name as my cousin." Linking the new information to information already stored in your long-term memory is called elaborative rehearsal. Another way to make new information easier to remember is to make it personally relevant. This is one of the reasons that psychology professors often encourage students to think of examples of the concepts from their own lives. To retrieve information from memory, cues may be helpful. Cues are things that were present when you initially formed the memory. For example, have you ever gone from the living room to the kitchen to get something and then forgotten what you were going to get? Often if you go back to the living room, you will remember. I went to college at UC Santa Cruz and do not have a ton of specific memories of those years, but when I visit Santa Cruz, I find that lots of memories come flooding back. As I mentioned earlier, practicing retrieval also helps. To improve procedural memory, for skills like playing the piano, driving, or free throws, practice is key. I hope learning about your memory will help you remember things more effectively in the future. Let's start with your memory for the concepts you just learned in this lecture. Pause this video, get out a piece of paper, and write down as much as you can remember about each of the concepts listed. Recognition refers to knowing information when you see it. Recall, which is more difficult, involves pulling information from your memory without any clues. Short-term memory has limited capacity and a short duration. During an exam, your short-term memory will help you read the questions, but it will be of limited use in helping you answer them. Long-term memory has a large capacity and duration. Committing new information to memory begins with encoding. Encoding involves initially noticing and perceiving new information. Information that is actively processed is moved into long-term memory storage. Retrieval consists of accessing information from long-term memory. Explicit memory involves information that we know, whereas implicit memory allows us to do things without necessarily being consciously aware or able to explain how. Procedural memory allows us to perform well-learned tasks without having to consciously think about them. I hope what you learned today helps you better understand your own memory and gives you some ideas about how to help it function optimally.